Hey there, it's BoardGameDave, and today we're taking a look at a game called Inferno, a strategic Euro game based on Dante's Divine Comedy and coming to Gamefound on February 20th. This game was designed by Fernando Sanchez with art by David Benzal and Christian Otazu. It plays from 1 to 4 players and it takes about 2 hours to play. Now, this is a game I actually heard about first on Facebook, and the publishers of the game, Red Mojo Games, were calling out to reviewers to send prototype copies to who would want to play the game, and I said absolutely send a copy my way. It looked very intriguing. I love this dark theme, and I was really intrigued by the board and the gameplay mechanism. So they sent me a game prototype, and I've played it solo, I've played it at 2 players, I've played it at 3 players, and I'm very eager to show you how this game plays. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you how to play Inferno. All right, welcome to Inferno. Now, this is obviously a very big game with a big board and a whole lot of rules. So this is not going to be a full rules teach. Of course, rules are subject to change as well as the art and components. So this is going to be a basic overview where I'm going to teach you most of the rules, and hopefully that'll give you a basic understanding of the mechanisms of this game Inferno. So in this game, players play as rivaling families in Florence, both living and dead, presumably, and we're going to gain infamy in hell by escorting souls from the evil city of Florence into these several layers of hell. We're going to escort these souls to their corresponding circle for basically eternal punishment and gain points by doing so. At the end of the game, once Dante makes his way down this staircase all the way to the very bottom layer, the game ends and the player with the most points wins. Now, I think probably the easiest way to teach this game is just to do a quick turn overview. So on a player's turn, there's 2 phases they're going to go through. The first is called the hell phase. This is when you either take a soul from the graveyard here and cross them over the River Styx into this first circle of hell called purgatory, right? And you would have to pay a drachma to do that. I'll talk about that in a second, right? So that is one thing you could do. Or if there's already souls in hell, like so, you can move a soul down 1 or more layers, right? And the important thing about this is first you have to follow these chains, right? So this soul cannot go to here, but it could go to here, for example, right? The second thing is you can jump over souls. So if there's a soul laying there, you can hop over and get them there. And the point of this whole phase of the game is, well, it's twofold, but one of the parts is you want to get a soul to its corresponding circle. So the brown soul has to get to this brown ring of hell, that 4th ring in. When that happens, you're going to lay them down, and that player who did that scores that many points. But beyond that, probably more importantly, is the icon where your soul's movement ends, is going to correspond with the second phase of your turn. So let's say in this case, my soul moved from here and hopped down to here, this kind of captain's wheel, right? Now we're going to look at the Florence board for the second phase of my turn, which is going to be either taking an action or accusing a sinner. So let's talk about taking actions. Since my soul, during the hell phase, stopped on this wheel, right, I'm going to look at that wheel quadrant, and there's 2 actions I can take, that one or that one. Of course, I'll talk about the actions in a second. Now, you're probably already thinking, well, what if I don't want to take an action corresponding to the symbol I land on? Well, you can always pay 2 drachma to ignore the shield crest that you landed on and go to any action or accuse a sinner from any action or space. Now, the currency, right? There are these drachma, these silver coins right here. You're going to use this for sort of those nefarious, devilish deeds that you're going to be, doing down here in hell. And then the regular kind of golden colored coins, these are the florins, which you'll be using in Florence for those city actions, just so you know. And there's places like this where you can convert those 2 different kinds of coins. But anyway, what was I saying? You can spend 2 drachma to ignore the symbol that you landed on. But let's say you don't have the coins, or you don't want to do that. Well, then you just take the action at that quadrant. You take one of your workers from your player board, which I've got right over here. You start with 4 workers, right? And you'll place one of your workers into one of those 2 actions. There's the regular action space and the special action space, right? Very quickly, I'm going to go over some of these action spaces. I'm not going to go over all of them because you don't really need to know what they all do to get a general gist of the game. So first, again, converting one kind of coin to another. This is scoring your resources, paying your fraud cards. These are fraud cards. You're going to start with a certain amount of them, and You can play them for immediate benefits, I should say, and end game bonuses as well. Now, in order to do that, you need to have the corresponding resources. Otherwise, you're not going to get any benefits from activating them. So that can be done over here at the market, right? That's where you'll get those resources that correspond to these fraud cards. That green one over here, that's where you're going to add floors to your tower. You start with a 0 level tower. As you build onto them, you get more spaces to put your workers, to put resources, and to put nobles, okay? Let's talk about nobles over here. As you gain nobles, they're gonna go into your tower, right? And that's gonna be important for accusing sinners, which is the other thing you can do during this phase. You can get Florence here. Over here in this purple area, you can get a scoundrel. These are tiny little meeples. So you can get one of these, and the scoundrels are gonna let you avoid paying this extra coin surcharge at some of these special locations. And the scoundrel is the only type of meeple that can go to the market. So it's important to get a scoundrel early on. Over here, you can convert coins, build gates on these walls down here. You can move the centaur down there for scoring. I'll talk about that later. And interact with the gods or the River Styx and take souls out of here. So again, lots going on, but that's the basic actions up there at the top. Let's talk about accusing a sinner. So the other thing you can do on your turn after you move your soul is accusing a sinner. Again, that should happen from the corresponding shield that you have. So let's say I want to do that. Well, first, I'm going to look in that quadrant and see if I have a worker there. I do, right? On that blue space. So that means I can accuse a blue sinner. Now, all of these colors correspond to different sins like gluttony or greed or lust or things like that, but I'm not sure what they all correspond to. We'll just say a blue soul. Now, let me talk you through the stages of accusing a sinner, which are all printed, thankfully, on the board right here. So, accusing a sinner first. The worker that's doing the accusing, that's this guy. He's gonna go back to your tower. So I said that meeples go to your tower. That's not really a good thing because eventually a lot of your workers are gonna end up here stuck in the tower, but they're doing the accusing, right? So they need to talk to whoever's gonna, I suppose, execute these souls, right? Next, and then any other workers from Florence go back to your home board and they're available in your supply. Next, we're gonna take a blue soul from the supply and add them to the graveyard. Again, we have sentenced this person to death, seemingly. Where was I? Down here. Next, we're going to advance up that corresponding track. So we go down here to the blue track, and I'm going to take my skull and move it to step 1, right? That's a very important part of scoring, which we'll talk about in a second. And I get to take the star bonus of that track, which these can be randomly replaced as well. But in this case, I could place 2 gates on here, which are going to let me move souls into these deeper layers of hell, or gain 2 points. And then finally, this is how Dante moves to the next space. So Dante is going to go to there. Now, that is the timer of the game. So remember, once Dante gets the whole way down to here, the game ends. So you can kind of count how many accusations it's going to take to get him all the way to the bottom. By the way, as Dante hits these diploma spaces, you're going to check that corresponding color, that circle of hell, right? In this case, the purple circle, and see who has the most influence, who's gone up the furthest in that track. And whoever is highest up gets a diploma, and that's represented by putting one of these icons, your player color, onto the diploma space. What happens is, and we'll talk about the end game scoring here a little bit, at the end of the game, you're going to go down through each of these tracks, and if you've got a diploma there, you get to multiply this number times how far you've advanced on that track. So if the game ended like this, I get 3 times 2 for 6 points in the purple sphere. Now again, you have to have a diploma there, otherwise you don't get those points. It's worth noting that throughout the game, you can manipulate this centaur track using actions like this on this fraud card, right? Moving one of those cubes, or 2 of them, 1 space each, right? 2 moves total to the right. And of course, if you look up at this action spaces, you've got that same icon there to move those cubes. Now, what's really important though, is at the end of the game, after we've done all our manipulations up here, for each circle of hell, we're gonna go and count all the empty spaces and move the cubes to the left that many spaces. So let's say I've gone really hard on the green track, right? I'm multiplying this by 4. Well, if you look at the green circle, right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 empty squares or empty spaces. So this is gonna go the whole way back to 1. So if I am going really hard on the green track, of course, I want to get as many green souls in that space as possible and do other kind of manipulations as well. So that's a big part of endgame scoring, is getting those diplomas, moving up these tracks to multiply, and of course, blocking off those spaces in the corresponding tracks. And that, in a nutshell, is how to play Inferno. Again, you do the hell phase by moving a soul across the river or down, and then you do an action in Florence or an accuse a sinner. Now, there's a lot of things we didn't get to talk about, like, well, first of all, maybe the most glaring one are these gods. You might have been wondering, what are these standees? Well, in the game, there's going to be at least 6 of these gods or deities that you can interact with by going to this location right. Oh gosh, where is it? Right there, right? Spend a drachma to interact with one of these gods. And they all have special powers. The dog's going to chase bones and scare souls down the track. This guy can paralyze or put chains around a soul so that only you can move that soul, which is really powerful. And depending on which gods come out, there's a lot of variability in the way the game plays. There's also a lot of replayability in the sense that these action spaces are totally random, so you can mix those up. I also said that down here, these rewards that correspond to the tracks, those can be mixed up as well. There's also these fraud cards. So you're going to start with a certain number of them, like I said, but there's also 3 up here in the market, and these have really interesting powers, both immediate powers and of course end game kind of point scoring related benefits as well. These are the souls that are going to come out in the graveyard. You always get to get a sneak peek of what's coming next. If at any time the graveyard is empty, you'll refill it with these souls like so. We also didn't get to talk about this. On your player board, we have a little slot for each of those 4 resources. If you go to the location right there, that kind of peach colored location, you can take one of those resources. So let's say I had, oh gosh, some silks, right? You can take it from your supply in the tower and move it over to the corresponding scoring location and score, in this case, 4 points or gain a half diploma. Half diplomas are nice because you can use 2 of them to get a diploma retroactively that you didn't get during the game. So things like that. Again, lots of things to talk about, but again, this is just kind of a broad overview of how the game plays. Again, you're going to keep on playing and accusing sinners, right? Each time you accuse, this is going to work its way down the track, assigning diplomas. Once you get there, the player who moved it to the final space gets 2 points. Everybody else gets a turn. And then you go into end game where you're going to activate all the right side of your fraud cards, do some more manipulations. You're going to gain scores for majorities of having coins or family members or sections of your tower. And then whoever has the most points wins. And that is Inferno, again, in a nutshell. All right, so there's your quick overview of Inferno. Now, when I rank or review games, I typically have a 7-point criteria system that I use to kind of rate how much I like the game. Now, today I'm gonna just kind of breeze through those 7 criteria and just give you my first impressions on what I think about Inferno based on those criteria. So first is art and components. And of course, I really, really love the art style in this game. I love this cover. It's so dark. It's so instantly engaging and intriguing. I love the board. I love the colors that they used. The iconography, for the most part, I really think is clear and tells you what you need to know. I love the art on these deity cards like so. These are so lovely. I like the location tiles and the art there. I like the art of the standees. Component-wise, of course, there's a lot of wooden components that I really enjoy. I love this giant bag of all these souls that are included in the game, but also I believe they are going to be using miniatures for these deities that you'll be moving around the board, which is really cool. So check out the Gamefound page for those miniatures. But overall, art and components, I'm very impressed with. Again, this was just a prototype copy, so it's only going to get nicer and nicer as far as art and components go. I am thrilled at the way this game looks. Next is complexity versus audience. Now, on BGG right now, it says the weight's 3 out of 5. I think it's probably heavier, closer to like a 3.5, 3.3 out of 5. But the audience for this game presumably are going to be people who are expecting a heavier, thinkier, crunchy Euro game. Obviously, this is not a family or a party game, so I think for the audience, this is the right weight. It gives you enough agency and strategy and tactile decision making, so I think that the complexity of the weight is really good for the audience in mind for this game. Next is thematic integration, and unfortunately here I have to say that I think there's more theme in the rulebook than there is in the game and on the board in the mechanisms themselves, meaning In the rulebook, they go into a lot of detail about the different locations, why you get a scoundrel at the haystack, and why this certain noble corresponds with this certain type of sinner, and all that stuff. There's a lot of flavor text there in the rulebook. Unfortunately, in the game, especially that hell phase, it kind of turns into this spatial, two-dimensional puzzle where you're hopping over souls to get to where you need to go, which doesn't really seem thematic. I mean, if you're taking I don't know, maybe you have a soul that's being convicted of lust and he needs to get down to the 6th layer of hell, how comes he gets to jump over these two that are in greed and cowardice? Or you know, it's very strange and abstract in that sense. Are you hopscotching your soul down to where they need to go? Or the centaur, right, in the Phlegethon River, who's going to multiply the souls. Why does he care how many empty souls are in that circle of hell? Thematically, you know, it's not super strongly thematically tied to maybe the theme, but that's okay. I think that it's presenting a very engaging and compelling experience, but is it the most thematic game? I don't think so. The art is lovely and the theme is so great and intriguing, but it's not the most thematic game, I have to say. Fourth is intuitive mechanics. Now, this game, as with many Euro games, is gonna feel very intuitive once you've played it a few times, but those first few games, there's a lot to wrap your head around about the different colors and which ones correspond to which track, and you know, how the souls can move and how they hopscotch over each other, and how do they get through the gates, and can you go through anybody's gates, and what each location means, and the iconography, and what's the River Styx action, and when you remove souls from the graveyard, can you only go up those tracks, and what's the bonuses for each track? It's a lot. Sorry, my nose is squeaking. It's a lot to process your first time through is all I'm saying, but that can be said for pretty much any strategic Euro game that's a similar weight. So the first time, you might be overwhelmed with all the colors and iconography and things, but as you play it more, you do find that it's much more intuitive, and you find the common thread that kind of links all the different actions together and the disparate mechanisms. You're going to move a soul, you're going to take a corresponding action in a location, and then, you know, again, all those different pieces, they tend to combine together in a cohesive manner once you've played it a few times. So, not the most intuitive game I played. There are certainly some fiddly elements, but overall, I think it works pretty well. And once you've played it a few times, you'll get the hang of it for sure. As for the replayability, I think it's really great that the game is designed with so much variable setup. So the locations and where they end up and which ones are paired together, the benefits you get from accusing different sinners, those can change every game. The gods or deities or guardians, as I think they're actually called, right? Changing those every game is gonna lend to different strategies and different ways of manipulating those souls as you move them down the track. So there's a lot to explore in this game, and I think that there's a lot of replayability as you play with different people, or even with the same people, exploring different strategies based on, you know, how the setup turns out. I think there's a lot of room to replay this game over and over potentially. Sixth is the length and fun factor, and here I do need to say that this game can definitely be prone to analysis paralysis. If you're looking at the board at the beginning of your turn and you're doing this hell phase, let's say you have 9 different souls you can move, right? Each one can move to at least 2 locations, let's say, and those locations correspond to, or those quadrants correspond to 2 locations. You have a myriad of options, and you need to think about, how am I setting other people up? Am I getting that soul to a place where I can score it? Is it going to a location I want to go to? It can be very overwhelming to process and judge all these different decisions you're making every single turn, and that's just the hell phase, right? Not even to mention the location phase. I will say the actions themselves are very quick. Once you decide on what you're going to do, the execution of the turn is very quick. However, again, planning out what you're going to do and revising that based on what the last player did. You know, it's a very volatile, ever-changing board, and what you had in mind can be totally messed up by the time it comes back to you. So if you're AP prone, or you're playing with people who are AP prone, it can lead to a very long game, in my opinion. So I played a 2-player game and a 3-player game, and both of them were pushing just about 3 hours, which to me, for a game like this, I feel like is a little long. I might be unique in that, and again, I think I maybe was playing with like an AP prone person, and even, you know, for myself, I find that I do want to optimize my turn, so there's a lot to think about. Now, you might be able to breeze through a game of this in an hour and a half at 3 players, let's say, but for me, almost 3 hours for a game like this it seems a little bit long. Now, I did talk to someone on Instagram who also played the game at, I think, a convention, and they said the length felt fine. So this might just be my personal, experience / preference, but a little bit long for my taste. I will say the solo game, I took about an hour and a half to maybe like an hour 13 to play through a solo game. So that's pretty easy breezy. It's just you. You can sort of set up yourself for big combos and things like that. So the length, a little bit long for my taste. The fun factor, it is fun, but once we start getting past that 2.5 hour mark, sometimes to me, it just seems like it's a little bit too long and I'm not having as much fun. But again, your experience may vary. That's just my personal take on the length. And finally, of course, is cost versus value. Now, with this game launching on Gamefound next month, I don't know what they're going to be asking for the game, but just know that the final product presumably is going to be nicer than what you saw today, with upgraded art and components and miniatures instead of standees, and maybe ideally metal coins instead of cardboard coins for the drachmas and the florins. I would love to see that. So I can't tell you whether it's worth the price because I don't know what they're going to be asking for it, but if this seems like a game that's up your alley, if you enjoy the unique theme and are drawn to the dark art and imagery, and you like the mechanisms and things, I think this is definitely a game that could be well worth your buck. Again, if it seems like a game that would be a good fit for you and your gaming group. And those were some of my initial impressions of Inferno from Red Mojo Games. Like I said, this game is coming to Gamefound on February 20th, so you don't want to miss it. I'll have a link down in the description to the campaign preview page. Go check it out, do whatever it is you do on Gamefound, heart it or like it or follow it or something. I'm really looking forward to the way this game's going to evolve and change throughout the course of the campaign, with stretch goals maybe, or even just upgraded components or artwork, and the way the rules are going to be changing and modifying. I know the solo mode, they've been tweaking these solo challenges that are really fun and compelling. So anyways, go check out the page, give it a look if this seems like your kind of game, which again, if you're drawn to this dark kind of, devilish theme and dark aesthetic, go give it a look. And thank you, by the way, for putting up with me today. I am sick, as you can probably tell. I've got the sinus infection. It's been lingering for weeks, so hopefully I'm on the mend. But thank you for putting up with a very, hopefully not too nasally video. But I really did want to talk to you about this game, Inferno. So go check it out on Gamefound. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Take care and happy gaming. Bye.